Hi guys, welcome back aboard good old Athena for yet more DIY fun. This is my 444th video here on YouTube, so that's a little bit of a milestone. If you've been watching for the last couple of months, you'll know that Ava and I have frantically been working towards finishing our to-do list here, and as you can see, most of them are now done. In fact, we're at the stage where all we need to be able to start bringing Athena towards the UK is a working power source. Our fridge, our induction cooktop, our electric oven, our freezer, washer, dryer, all of that is stuff that requires electricity, but also something as simple as running the diesel engine requires electricity. Here on our D240 we've got a 24 volt high output alternator, but it's not working. A new one is supposed to arrive on Friday, and fingers crossed that works. But it also looks like we have a little bit of an alignment issue because there is some black dust in here, so we might get back to that later in the video. Another way for us to generate power is to use solar panels, which are going to go here on our solar arch. Unfortunately, the arch is not finished yet, so we can't install any solar panels. A third way for us to generate electricity is by using a diesel genset. Yesterday, a big wooden box arrived at the marina. After having removed the screws holding the box together, we got our first glimpse of our brand new Fisher Panda 5000i PMS. The night before, we had moved Athena over to the mast crane, figuring that it would be the perfect tool for lowering the genset aboard. It turned out to be very helpful, not only in getting the genset aboard the boat, but also the final lift inside of the technical compartment. The genset itself weighs only around 80 kilos, so it's not super heavy, but still easier to lift with the crane. The manual on Fisher Panda's website was not super clear as to the diameter of the exhaust. In the manual it says 30 millimeters, but in the technical drawing it says 40 millimeters. So I held off on running the exhaust hose until we actually had the genset here, and it turned out to be 40 millimeters. Now it was time to move the genset into the technical compartment. I had built a little ramp ahead of time, and that was the easy part. Then it was time for the last lift. Space was pretty confined, so there was no way we could simply just lift it up in place. We tried using wooden blocks to block up the genset to get it high enough, but that turned out to be wobbly. In the end, I drilled a little hole in the cockpit coaming and we used the crane to lift the genset. That worked really well. Ta-da! There it is, mounted in place. There's still a ton of work to do, but at least the heavy lifting is done. As far as the hole I drilled up in the cockpit coaming, as you can see right there, I've put a little eye nut there, so the next time we need to remove the genset, we can simply just lift it out using that. That should be very easy. I really hope we won't need that eye nut anytime soon, because that will mean something have gone horribly wrong and we'll have to remove the genset to fix it. But yeah, let's cross our fingers that the product name, 5000i PMS, is not foreshadowing future instability issues. All kidding aside, at least from what I've heard, this genset has a really good solid reputation, so it's a welcome addition here aboard Athena, and I'm very excited to have this extra layer of redundancy in our power generating setup. The genset came with this hefty manual here that I shall reread tonight to make absolutely sure I haven't missed anything. Also included with the genset was this little display, the iControl 2, for starting and stopping the genset. Over the winter I plan on getting the genset connected to my servo box so that I can do auto starts and some other cool stuff. There's also an external fuel pump included and this service box containing a lot of the materials you need for servicing the genset. I've included a few extra service kits in this just to make sure we have enough, but yeah, there's definitely plenty in here. Fisher Panda also offers an installation kit with the water lock, muffler, anti-siphoning device and so on, but I already had all of that stuff lying around from the planned installation of the DIY alternative I had, so yeah, I'm just gonna reuse this and not order the one from Fisher Panda. To get the generator up and running, we need to connect the fuel line to and from the tank, we need to get the raw water connected, including the vented loop, we need to connect the exhaust and also get the starter on the genset connected to the battery. Speaking of the starter battery, one little fun detail about the 5000i is that it doesn't charge its own starter battery, so you have to have some kind of charger to do that. In my case, I happen to have this Victron Energy Blue Smart Charger 7-amp version laying around, so that's what I'll use. Let's start by figuring out the fuel supply, and a part of that is going to be figuring out where to install this water separator. It is now a couple of days later. Lots of stuff has happened. I've been working on the genset installation, but for instance, yesterday we also took care of the provisioning. So now we have enough food aboard to last us about 4 to 6 weeks. I've got the big inverter doodad box for the genset up here. I've got an RCD next to it. Most of the plumbing is hooked up. So yeah, we've made good progress. Don't worry about the little bit of blue coolant down there. That is just from when they tested the genset at the factory. But I've chosen to install the water separator and the pre-filter and the filter over here so they're easy to get to, because I believe you're supposed to change out this filter as a part of the regular maintenance. I still have a little bit of work to do on the exhaust and the raw water intake, so I'm going to be fiddling with that today. And while I do that, Ava's going to be cooking for us up at the Marina kitchen for next week's potential passage to the UK.
We don't know if we're going to go to the south of England or to Scotland. We're going to let the weather decide. And to be honest, we're a little indecisive about where we want to go. Both places seem to have their advantages. The south of England seems to have a lot of marinas and places to get boat work done, whereas Scotland has the Caledonia Canal that we would really like to see, and also the Highlands. So right now, we don't really know. What I do know though is whichever way we go, whether we're gonna cross the North Sea or go south, is we're gonna need food to eat. So I am in the Marina kitchen today, and I'm gonna be cooking some food for our passage. Because this is our first big sail and passage, we wanted to make some things that are easier to eat while underway, like quiche, meatballs, shredded chicken tacos, pasta. I'm gonna make some homemade granola. And also, this stuff can all be frozen if we don't eat it or if our plans change. I feel very grateful for the Marina kitchen. While Matt is working on the generator on the boat and using up a lot of the space, I can use the kitchen and spread out, use the tables, use everything, and get everything done. Plus, it's not too shabby of a view while you're cooking. All right, I have to start cooking. I have some spinach and onions on the pan, getting ready for the baby quiche. Some spinach and onion, lots of bacon, baby quiche. Dang it, I just forgot the most important part of the quiche, the cheese. I'm gonna try and pull them out, see if I can add it. Whew. Okay, quiche is saved, hopefully. Well, those are in the oven. I'm gonna start the meat sauce, and I'm not gonna pretend like I'm making my sauce from scratch. I'm using a can. Don't tell my mother. We're running out of time. There's no shame in the can today, but I'm gonna doctor it up with some eggplant and spinach. Baby quiche out. Forgot I also put laundry in, so luckily, just a quick little walk over to the laundry room. Back to cooking. Next, I'm making Ava and Mess's famous Norway meatballs. I just came up with that name, but they're famous because Mess and I love them, and the only thing they have to do with Norway is that we came up with them when we were there. And what you do is just use some chips instead of breadcrumbs. When we were in Norway, we went to go make chicken meatballs, and we realized we didn't have any breadcrumbs, but we didn't have chips. I'm telling you, the chips are a game changer. They're like these delicious, savory meatballs, meat bombs, and they're good to just like snack on or for lunch, and that's probably what we'll use them for, but they're so good, I'm telling you. Chips, game changer. Meatball scooped, ready to go in the oven. Meatballs are in, time to start the granola bars. I ran out of battery, but I made it back with all the food, and we may not know where we're going next week, but at least we won't starve.
While I was working on the Jenny, I found the receipt from yesterday's provisioning run, and while this is not a long receipt by US standards, it's certainly the longest receipt I have ever had. While Ava was busy cooking, I finished the genset installation. I think it's all done now, except for one little thing, and that is to install the eye control display that's going to go here at the nav station. This display will allow us to start and stop the genset from in here, so we don't have to go into the technical compartment. And it'll also allow us to, for instance, run the fuel pump to air out the system. So yeah, we need to install this before we can get the thing fired up. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Fisher Panda includes a cutout template for this. The closest thing we've got is this thing, but it's not to scale. So that would have been really nice if they did that. But yeah, let's make a hole. I am a little bummed that there was no template for cutting the hole, but at least the instructions for connecting the display to the cable are very clear, so there should be zero chance of messing this up. There are two connections I haven't made on the back of the display here. One of those is for auto start. Later this winter I'm going to connect the display up to my servo box so that the servo box can start the genset automatically in case it needs to. Before we can attempt to start the beast here, let's just check the oil and the coolant, and also there is a little bit of configuration we'll have to do on the inverter charger. Oil looks absolutely perfect, and I checked the coolant earlier, but let's just do it again just to make absolutely sure. Yep, nice and full. This is Victron Connect. This is the software that's used for configuring the inverter charger in the aft cabin. And there are a couple of things we need to change there. And I find it absolutely hilarious that the default password for this is set, as in somebody's snoring. Dynamic current limiting should be disabled. Looks like that's the default setting. So let's move on to the assist current boost factor. The default setting is 2.0. The manual recommends adjusting that to 1.3. And the last thing we need to do is to disable the OOPS function, the uninterrupted power function. So that is done. We should now be ready. Let's see if the display turns on, because like I mentioned earlier, we need the display to air out the fuel system. Prime fuel. To turn on and off the fuel pump, press the start button. I've opened the seacog, we've bled the fuel system, we have oil, we have coolant, I've made the modifications in the inverter charger. I think it's time we try and start the genset. Fingers crossed. I've just turned our kettle on just as a load, so right now we're heating water with dinosaur squeezings. Everything is nice and cold, so that's a good sign. And with the sound insulating box in place, the genset is not that loud. Outside of the boat, all you hear is basically that water splashing. I'm going to call this a big, giant success, and it is really nice for once to have worked on a decent sized project that didn't end up putting up a heck of a fight and dragging out. So yeah. Giant success. Being the somewhat paranoid type, I've just taken apart the exhaust that's hiding below this old bunk here. There's a water lock down there, and I just wanted to check to see how much water was in there. Because if there was too much water, then when we heal, then there's a danger of it ending up in the engine and it's instantly dead. So yeah, that wouldn't be great. But I just checked, and there's only just a tiny amount of water in there, so it is perfect. The reason for my paranoia is the manual, but in kind of a good way. It goes into great detail about a proper marine installation, but of course, this being a boat, I can't follow these instructions because, well, there's not room to install the generator where the manual suggests. In the examples in the manual, the genset is always installed on the center line of the boat, and as you saw, ours is installed on the starboard side. The manual is very concerned about what happens when the boat heels, so here's a 15, 30 and 45 degree heel. And as you can see, with a proper installation, the water stays out of the genset. It seems like the key takeaway here is that you need to have the water lock located below the genset and then have this loop here be close enough to the genset so that the volume of water that's trapped in here is not big enough that when the boat heels, it gets into the genset. Here is an example of what happens if you have too much water in the wet exhaust and you heel. Well, it gets into the genset and oof, that's not gonna be good. With the genset here aboard Athena being installed here on the starboard side and also all of the exhaust being located over here, I don't think we are as susceptible to the healing thing illustrated in the manual, but there is something else we should probably be aware of. The exhaust comes out the bottom of the genset, goes into the water lock, comes up into that great big loop there, and then goes to the through hole. So if we ever bury that side of the deck in water, well then I think there might be a chance that we're going to be siphoning in water. If any of you guys have experience with stuff like this, please go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'd love to know how we can improve our installation here to avoid any potential issues. But yeah, let's move on to something else, but also kind of related. our other way of generating power right now. The new high output alternator showed up and it's working, we're charging, that's awesome, but there is still the alignment issue. As you might be able to see down there, there's a little bit of black dust, and also the position of this expansion tank is not really ideal. It's very close to the belt. To be able to fit this alternator, I had to move the mount from the bottom of the engine leg to the top of the engine leg. That brought this belt closer to this hose, which right now is just secured with this zip tie here to get it out of the way. And I think that's also what's caused the alignment issue. With the expansion tank just temporarily smushed out of the way, it does look like the alternator does need to rotate just a tiny bit for it to line up. Here's the evidence that it's not me that's crazy. There is some black dust there, so there's definitely something wrong. Like I said, I had to move this alternator mount on top of the engine support here, and I also had to make a new tensioning arm here, or modify the existing one. So yeah, there's been some changes here, but let's see if we've got some play in this if I just loosen it. There's definitely a little bit of play here. I don't know if that's going to be enough to correct, but let's give it a try. After having fiddled about with this for a couple of hours, I think this is as close as I can get it without modifying the alternator mount anymore. We are still a little bit out, but it's better. I think the issue that remains is that the alternator is tilting ever so slightly forward, and that means if I compare this pulley to this, we're out by about 0.4 millimeters down here, but yeah, this is as close as I can get it. I doubt that is enough of an improvement, but let's take it for a spin and see what happens. I've had the engine running for almost half an hour, and I'm having trouble seeing if the dust that's in there is old or new dust. I've cleaned it up pretty good now, and then I think we'll do the final test tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to be doing quite a bit of motoring, and my plan is to keep an eye on the new alternator to see if it's still generating yucky dust. If it is, then I'll quickly swap it out for the stock 12-volt one, and then we'll push on. And then we'll just use the genset to generate the electricity we need. A bit of redundancy is certainly a good thing.
Athena is finally almost ready.
Yep, most of the boat is stowed away and secured, almost ready to go. I have one last thing I want to do while this video is rendering, and that is to install the new MDI controller on the Volvo, so I no longer have to start it with a screwdriver. Let's end this video in the customary fashion and update the board. So I went to the dentist this week. That was a horrible experience, but I went to the dentist. We installed the Jenny. And, well, we didn't mount the pot holder. That's not strictly necessary. We also need to secure the diesel tank, but I can do that tomorrow while we're underway. We did finish installing and configuring the alternator. So, yeah, we're done. The plan tomorrow is to head to Lemvig, where we'll get COVID tests before leaving the country, and we'll also pick up the last few items, and then we'll start waiting for a weather window to see if we're going to go straight to Scotland or south. But, yeah. We'll see.
I've been deemed head of social media Instagram division, and we're going to be posting stories daily while we still have cell phone coverage. So if you want more real-time updates, follow our Instagram account. We'll leave the link down below.
With my recent order from my favorite Danish marine pusher, they included a few gifts because they knew we were leaving, and they even wrote here "Safe Journey" on the packaging. Thank you so much to Boonet. I hope wherever we end up, we find marine stores that are just as friendly. I'll leave a link for Boonet down below. There's a high likelihood that something is going to break while we're underway. The boat hasn't really been put through all of its paces yet, so next week's video shouldn't be completely without DIY content. But even if we're super lucky and nothing breaks next week, well, then when we get to the UK, as you know, we have plenty more DIY content coming up. So, yeah. But next week, we hope you guys will join us here aboard Athena for a little bit of sailing, hopefully. But yeah, that's going to be it for this week's video. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video,
please remember to leave a like.
See you!